You're a, suburban middle-class mom who's got her daughter, who's got an adult, but her daughter in the car with her. But you still feel responsible. If my brother's in the car and I'm at the wheel, I'm responsible. That's my brother. I'm responsible for his life too, right? You feel responsible for your family member. And a bunch of barbarian lunatics started banging on the car and shouting curses and everything else. What's supposed to, and she said they started trying to get into her door. And no one's claiming that she lied, by the way, because some of this is on video. So what's the real? New York City is basically saying you need to at least leave it open to the mob to beat you to death because of social justice. And if you won't do that, we're going to punish you. You have to admit you're wrong if you think you have any right to self-defense. I have not forgotten, and I'm sure many of you had similar experiences, when the Democrat Party in an election year in 2020 decided that it was okay for there to be massive riots. In fact, it was ethical. It was honorable, even during a pandemic at a time when the country was already on its back feet, perhaps even knocked down to the ground. BLM was so important, you see, because a couple of cops engaged in abuse in Minneapolis that resulted in the death of George Floyd. The entire country had to be convulsed with riots and rage. And it happened even in my own neighborhood in Midtown Manhattan. It happened in dozens, if not hundreds, of cities and towns across the country. Well, there was this incident that happened then as well. You'll recall there were numerous videos where people were surrounded. They were surrounded in their cars by the angry BLM mob, and they decided that they were going to that they would pound on the windshield. They would threaten. They would scream. And sometimes people said that they had had enough and that they were just going to drive off because they were terrified and they didn't want to get dragged out and beaten, sent to the hospital, perhaps even killed, because that happens when you have an angry mob that has decided you are a target for some reason. That happens when people are already breaking the law and think that they can get away with even further violations of law because, righteousness and justice is on their side. So, Clay, you have this mother of 3 children who is facing in New York City, this mom of 3 facing 7 years in prison right now because she decided that while she was in her car back in this case is likely to go to trial right now. That's why it's in the headlines. It's taken 2 years for it to make its way fully through the courts. And she is taking it all the way. I give her a lot of credit. Kathleen Casillo, 54 years old. She has rejected a plea deal once again. And let's just remember, she's rejected a plea deal that would have sent her to 6 hours of community service and a 1-year license suspension. Okay? Because it is, for her, the principle of the thing. A BLM mob surrounded her car, pounded on it. There's video of this, by the way. Pounded on her doors, tried to open the doors, called her a white privileged B word. I don't know.
We can say it. We can say bitch.
Clay always. Do you ever notice Clay will always say the naughty words? I'm always scared to say them.
I did all the research. This is the lawyer in me. When I started doing radio, I was like, I want to know the exact words that we can say. And not
so
on
we
this
can
show.
Say
When I first, we can say they called her a white privileged bitch.
Yes.
And we're beating on the doors. Do we know how old the kids are in the car?
The kid was in her. Well, her daughter was in her 20s. I was in the passenger side. But look, this is very straightforward. You have a mob blocking traffic, which is illegal. A mob menacing someone, threatening them, which is illegal. Creating a credible fear of serious bodily harm, which justifies a self-defense response. This childish, lunatic idea that you can just block traffic or block cars. Occasionally people have done this in the name of, they'll block a bridge. This has happened very rarely for some kind of a conservative cause. And I immediately say, stop that crap. They do that You don't have a right to do this. It's illegal. That is what the other side does. But Clay, she's taking this all the way because you know what? The system has to get a guilty verdict out of her, or else they know that the activist groups and the BLM groups and all these others in New York and across the country say, see, this is unjust. This is only happening because she's a white woman of privilege. No, she wasn't forced to sit in her car and get beaten because a bunch of crybabies think the law doesn't apply to them.
Yeah, and the fact, what did you say the offer was to her? Like 6 hours of community service?
6 hours of Clay. I know people that got more than that for, scratching some graffiti on a park bench. 6 hours of community service, 1 year license suspension. She says, no, take me to trial.
Well,
I think this is some big...
cojones on her part. She is getting offered, based on that, Buck, probably the lowest punishment that they are even able to offer. Because to your point, 6 hours of community service, and now the 1 year license suspension is maybe like particularly grating to her. I don't know what she has to drive about on a day-to-day basis or whatever else, but that still it's less than you would get, for instance, for a DUI. And I'm not saying a DUI is not significant, but you would, if you didn't, do the test and they couldn't prove that you were directly
drunk. Well, it's a 6 month automatic if you won't blow in the breathalyzer in New York.
That's right. So this is pretty minimal punishment. And she faces, what, 7 years?
7 years in prison for a reckless endangerment. And this is very straightforward. Look, we always say to people, stand by your principles. If you're in the right, the system... I don't know. The system's supposed to take care of you.
Where is the jury?
It's in New York City. Manhattan criminal court is where this is going down. I mean, my friends.
I respect the fact that she's standing up and saying no, Buck. I'm telling you that if I were in this exact same scenario, I would take the plea deal. I wouldn't trust the jury, or I'm assuming it's a jury and not a bench trial, right? Do we know that?
I'd have to check to see. I think it hasn't. Oh, no, I'm sorry. She has rejected it specifically. She wants a jury trial.
Yeah. So she wants a jury trial, and I respect that she wants a jury trial. My concern would be the forum, right? If you told me that I was going to sit in front of a jury in Williamson County, Tennessee, where I live, over this charge, I'd feel pretty comfortable about it. We've talked about the challenges that anybody who is not left-wing faces, for instance, in Washington, D.C., I'd be nervous about the jurors that I would get in New York City, even though I think she's 100% in the right. And certainly even the prosecutors don't think this case is very good if they've offered her that level of plea deal, right? A relatively insignificant penalty.
This is getting a little bit of the vibes here of Tom Cruise in A Few Good Men when he has that revelation when he goes... Why do you offer like a 6 month sentence and assign a guy who only does plea deals to a murder case?
Yeah.
And it's because you just want it to go away and you want some kind of admission of guilt. You want the whole thing to go away.
That's right.
The city of New York, the woke DA, Alvin Bragg, who is the worst, by the way.
Didn't you say he's dropped like 50% of all charges? They've continued to keep this case going, which is, I think, important here, too.
This is really showing you, though, in New York City today, America's largest city, you're a gang member with a long rap sheet who's found, with a loaded pistol illegally in his pants. Let's not punish that guy too harshly. We don't want him to have a tarnished future. So Alvin Bragg sees plenty of reason for leniency for people like that, obviously, by the numbers. But you're a suburban middle class mom who's got her daughter, who's got an adult, but her daughter in the car with her. But you still feel responsible. If my brother's in the car and I'm at the wheel, I'm responsible. That's my brother. I'm responsible for his life too, right? You feel responsible for your family member. And a bunch of barbarian lunatics started banging on the car and shouting curses and everything else. What's supposed to, and she said they started trying to get into her door. And no one's claiming that she lied, by the way, because some of this is on video. So what's the real? New York City is basically saying you need to at least leave it open to the mob to beat you to death because of social justice. And if you won't do that, we're going to punish you. You have to admit you're wrong if you think you have any right to self-defense. I think I'm with you. If you are an attorney, right? If you were her attorney,
I would be saying take the plea deal.
You're saying take the plea because
risk
you don't know what's going to happen here.
You just sit there and you say, look, you're a 52-year-old mom.
54.
54-year-old mom. 7 years you're facing. Let's say you get the wrong jury. I respect her standards and I respect her principles, and I certainly think that she is in the right. I would just be nervous about what the risk is here versus what you're agreeing to.
And there's another important look, I think what she's doing is heroic in a sense because she's standing on the principle of I did nothing wrong,
right?
And I will not allow the city of New York, because it is a bunch of Democrat woke cowards who run it, to punish me in any way, to say that I agreed that this is like, it's powerful stuff, man. You remember in Braveheart when the bad stuff's happening to William Wallace and they're just like confess and it all ends and he yells freedom, and like I basically tear up just thinking about it to this day. She refuses to confess to something she didn't do. Noteworthy as well, another factoid here, that Ms. Casillo was issued initially a desk appearance ticket for the incident. So initially it was like, look, these idiots were in the road. They were threatening you. You drove away. Nobody died. And you were just trying to escape to safety. You had fear, credible fear. They gave her a desk appearance ticket, but then they decided to escalate it because BLM is so important to society.
Can we get her on the show?
I don't know. I mean, maybe. I don't know if she'll do it right before she faces the jury.
I mean, if she's my point on this is I think if she came on this show and she told her story, remember how we spent some time talking about the bodega owner who got charged with murder that they took in, and then everybody said as soon as his story went public and they released the video, they said, what are you talking about here? And then they released the guy and then they dropped all charges. I think if she came on our show, just tossing it out there, I think if she came on our radio show and described exactly what happened on that day and the same story that she would tell sitting in front of a jury, I think that New York would drop the charges against her. If they're already to the point, Buck, where they're saying, hey, 6 hours of community service, give up your license for a year, which is, I understand a lot of you out there, that's a big punishment, the 1 year license thing, the 6 hour of community service, whatever. But I think if she came on and she told her story with us, I think they would drop charges.
That's a bold statement. And
I would think the political pressure, I don't mean because I think so many people would hear her story that the political pressure, similar to what happened with the bodega employee who got his charges dropped.
Yeah, it would certainly help. But I just think it's important for people to see that there is a pattern here that in major cities with left-wing woke DAs, which they basically all have, there are some exceptions, but you look at big cities in America right now, the DAs are all woke. The wokeness is just weaponized political correctness. I mean, I actually think we should start using the term political correctness more just because we remember how we thought it was also absurd and stupid and wrong in the 90s. And now we say, anyway. Yeah. But it's just weaponized political correctness. It's a more extreme version of it. It's like the Taliban of political correctness. That's what wokeness is. And if you defend yourself, Clay, you cannot... A reasonable man's standard for self-defense in a lot of these cities will get you a murder charge or a reckless endangerment charge or whatever. That's the way they view it now. You must suffer because there are people who are angry and they're speaking out.